where she attended high school. Durham is the home of the University of New Hampshire, built in 1866, although the town's history dates back further than that. English colonists settled in the area as early as 1623, calling it Oyster River. In fact, it wasn't renamed Durham until 1723. Funny enough, the high school is still called Oyster River High School. Thankfully, though, their mascot is not an oyster. The town has changed a lot over the past 400 years, but some pieces of the original settlement remain. One of those reminders of the past is a house, which is also the oldest building in Durham, and is the Three Chimneys Inn, a restaurant and hotel on the banks of the Oyster River. But back in the mid-1600s, it looked a lot different. It was originally built by Valentine Hill, a businessman and property owner who ran the nearby sawmill and grist mill. The house started out like a lot of other dwellings, with a single story and a cellar. But in 1699, Valentine's son Nathaniel added 2 more stories. This addition included a feature known as Indian shutters. They were installed after an attack that had occurred 5 years earlier, when the French and local Native American populations from 3 separate groups descended upon the area. They had killed or captured 94 British colonists and destroyed over a dozen houses in the settlement. But Valentine's home survived. Over the years, it was passed down through several more families, who all made their own modifications to it along the way. In the early 1900s, for example, one owner added gardens, a stone wall, a swimming pool, and even tennis courts, with the intention of turning it into a summer estate. But eventually the house fell into disrepair, and it continued to deteriorate for over 80 years, until it was finally converted into the Three Chimneys Inn. Of course, with such a lengthy history, it was only a matter of time before the ghosts of the home's past caught up with its present, quite literally. You see, after the inn opened in the late 1990s, employees and guests started noticing some strange happenings around the property. Muddy footprints began appearing on the dining room floor, even underneath the rugs. A chef once claimed to have been wished a good morning by a ghostly woman wearing period clothing as he prepared the restaurant's menu that day. Wine glasses had levitated off tables before shattering upon the floor. Employees who have slept at the inn have also reported waking up to the sounds of footsteps that belonged to no one. And one person was startled out of her sleep when she felt someone playing with her hair. When she looked around the room, there was no one there. So who was responsible for all of this? Well, if the stories are to be believed, it was the dad, Valentine Hill, the man who built the house in 1649. And she had been a 20-year-old mother and wife who, according to the rumors, tragically drowned in the nearby Oyster River. So the next time the silverware at the Three Chimneys Inn goes missing, or the deadbolts lock on their own, don't assume there's a prankster on the loose. It's probably just Hannah, stopping by for a visit. About 50 miles south of Durham, New Hampshire, is Danvers, Massachusetts, better known as Salem Village, where the infamous Salem witch trials took place. But Danvers is home to more than just a 17th century witchcraft canon. In fact, Grim & Miles' Jamie Vargas has one particular legend from her town that isn't about witches at all. It takes place at the Essex Agricultural School, established in 1913 in the Hawthorne area of Danvers. Hawthorne was named for John Hawthorne, one of the judges who presided over the Salem witch trials. The area carries his name because he once owned the land, including the spot where the school now stands. And for those who are curious, he also happens to be the great-great-grandfather of author Nathaniel Hawthorne. Today, the facility prepares students for careers in everything, from agriculture and veterinarian professions to...
Why is that shut? Why is that shut? Why is that shut?
It also has a spooky reputation amongst students in South Lake. For example, the animals on campus are known to get scared.
Bro, what? Why was that shut?
As though they've been stepped on when no one else is around.
That wasn't supposed to be shut.
There have been reports of sudden temperature changes throughout the building, with rooms turning from hot to cold.
That was not supposed to be shut.
Also spotted floating light orbs on the grounds, as well as locked doors that fly open out of nowhere. Windows open and shut on their own, and blinds that have been drawn suddenly spring open. Students many years ago. The exact date is unclear, but the young man at the center of the story had been on the 3rd floor of one of the buildings, standing near a window with no one else around him, when he started screaming to be left alone.
It is
A teacher
shut.
standing nearby witnessed him swinging his fists in the air, as though he was fighting off an invisible attacker. Most frightening, though, he seemed to levitate off the floor, as if being picked up by an invisible hand. Whatever had grabbed him then tossed him out the window. As he fell, the teacher caught a glimpse of something in the window he'd been tossed from. A brief flash from a mysterious red light. And that's the story that most people claim is the root of all the unusual activity. Perhaps the student spirit lingers there, restlessly causing havoc all over campus. Or maybe it's his invisible killer who has never left, searching for another victim. Another member of our team, Jenna Rose Nethercott, hails from Brattleboro, Vermont, a small town with some big legends. Among them is a facility once used to treat the state's most vulnerable residents. At least that was the idea. Sadly, the reality is much darker. The Vermont Asylum for the Insane was founded in 1834 on the philosophy of moral treatment, a Quaker model that focused on humane and respectful care for all of its patients. At the time, the asylum was only one of 10 private psychiatric hospitals in the entire country, and it offered its patients a whole list of amenities. For one, the campus spread out across 600 glorious acres of land and featured sprawling pond-filled meadows and even a dense forest. And it was there, deep in the woods on the asylum grounds, where a tower was built. They called it the Retreat Tower. It had been constructed by the patients in 1887. Thanks to a belief among the faculty that manual labor was better than medicine at stabilizing a person's mental health. So they were put to work building a 65-foot-tall stone tower that loomed large over the campus. This Gothic tower was made from locally sourced granite and quartz, and looked a lot like the classic castle's turrets, complete with a toothed parapet placed on top. It offered stunning 365-degree views of a nearby town, and to get inside, one only needed to pass the large arched iron door, which is exactly what the asylum's patients did. Time after time, they climbed their way to the top of Retreat Tower, but not to take in those scenic views. To them, it was a means to an end. Their end. Patients would leap from the top of the tower, falling to their deaths on the ground below. As a result, the structure was sealed off to everyone. But the asylum is still in business. It's known today as the Brattleboro Retreat, and yes, even the tower is still there. And once a year, the town opens that heavy iron door and allows visitors to ascend the rickety metal stairs to the top, all of which is done under strict supervision, of course. But those on the ground should keep their eyes toward the sky, because legend says that visitors can still see bodies falling from the tower's peak, their ghostly shadows plummeting to their deaths below. Echoes, they say, of the patients who are still looking for a way out. My teammate Harry Marks is something of an expert on his home state of New Jersey, and while this next legend isn't from his hometown, it was a frequent stop for him and his friends during their high school years. They would jump in their car and visit a number of locations highlighted in the popular independent magazine Weird New Jersey.
The Growler
is located in Bernards Township,
and it's
20-minute drive south of George Washington's headquarters in Morristown. Bernards Township is made up of unincorporated communities like Basking Ridge and Liberty Corner, with large homes and quaint downtown shopping centers. It's small-town America in the middle of New Jersey. And not everything is all apple pie and baseball in Bernards Township. There is something darker there, a sinister energy that permeates the town, and it all comes back to one solitary tree. It stands alone in the middle of a field, its gnarled branches spreading out like an eldritch circulatory system over the patch of grass. It's called the Devil's Tree, and the origin of its name varies depending on...
How did I skip that?
Some say it was used by colonial farmers to hang any enslaved people who tried to escape their captors. Others claim its branches held the ropes of countless suicide victims over the years, including one noose belonging to a farmer who killed his entire family before hanging himself from the ominous tree. And there have also been rumors that the Ku Klux Klan, who once used the township as a base of operations, would lynch black residents at the several of its large branches hang almost perpendicular to the ground. But all that death, regardless of its origins, has come at a cost. For one, the tree is now believed to be cursed. Anyone who tries to cut it down will face the Grim Reaper himself, and its trunk bears the axe marks of the dozens who have tried. Secondly, it's been said that the souls of the men and women who have died there now reside within its branches, giving the bark a disquieting warmth to whoever touches it. And of course, you're welcome to check it out for yourself. Just watch your back, because there are those who say the Devil's Tree is more than just a tool of death. It's rumored to actually be a portal to hell, and that portal is guarded by a mysterious figure in a black pickup truck. Those who visit the tree at night have returned to their cars, only to see headlights in the rearview mirror. Headlights belonging to the ghostly pickup that chases them down the road until its lights vanish into the darkness. There's a college in the community of Elmira, New York that is absolutely filled with legends. And Elmira happens to be the hometown of my teammate, Alice Dean. Now, Elmira College was founded in 1855 as a women's college, although it started accepting men in the late 1960s. Thousands of students have come and gone over the last 168 years, and in that time, the institution has collected a number of stories within its hallowed halls. The two buildings have earned quite the reputation among the students: Tompkins Hall and Cowles Hall. Tompkins Hall was built in the 1920s and remains an all-female dorm to this day. Since then, students have reported hearing footsteps and doors randomly opening and closing on their own, even when the building is deserted. Although most have never felt anything malicious in Tompkins Hall, a few have claimed that the dorm is split in half spiritually, with one side being good and the other containing something darker. Residents have heard a variety of unusual yet benign sounds on the good side, but have noted the evil side is home to a demon-like shadow figure, along with ghost lights that move from room to room. There have also been sightings of spirits on the fourth floor. One is said to be the ghost of a nun who comes to surprise her sister with a visit, even though her sister is long dead. The other is a former student named Mary who died in a tragic accident many years ago. She's said to appear at night, usually in mirrors or windows, although some students have also reported hearing strange voices in the bathrooms and the hallways late at night. Cowles Hall, on the other hand, is plagued by only one specter, the ghost of Edith M. Stewart. Edith was from Tuxedo Park, New York, and in February of 1927, the 21-year-old senior found herself invited to a party off campus. Now, this was the late 1920s, a time when the movements of the female students were strictly monitored and controlled. So Edith had to get permission to leave campus. She managed to do that, but she was forbidden from leaving the city. Well, being a young, independent, modern woman, she broke that rule, traveling to Ithaca, about 45 minutes away. Edith behaved perfectly at the party, but the college had another trip anyway. When she got back to campus, the student council felt that it had to investigate. She panicked, terrified that she was going to be suspended. What would her parents think, right? And as it turns out, Edith happened to work in the office of the campus physician. When they weren't looking, she stole a bottle of strychnine from a cabinet and used it to poison herself. She died on February 17th of 1927.
Damn.
And around that same time every year, students in
200 sprinkler years?
Cold gusts of wind, accompanied by disembodied footsteps. And it's not just the students who feel they've experienced this. In fact, the facility closed down for 20 years prior to being renovated. And during that time, the only people inside were construction workers and students who had snuck in. And everyone reported hearing knocking from inside the walls, along with finding strange symbols drawn in the sawdust on the floor.
Oh, damn.
That wasn't the scariest part. They also witnessed a woman in white, beckoning them to follow her deeper into the building.
I can't believe it's 200 years.
Our next hometown legend takes us to Knoxville, Tennessee, home of my teammate Alex Robinson. And it was there, way back in 1817, that a new hotel opened, called appropriately the Knoxville Hotel. It was a gathering place for the city's elite, and was even a stopping point for several U.S. presidents. Now, the building changed names and owners over the years, eventually becoming the Lamar House Hotel in 1856. From that point on, it solidified itself as a part of American history. Leaders who would come to be known as Confederates would often gather there and give speeches out front in the lead-up to the Civil War. Once the conflict kicked off in earnest several years later, Confederate officers would stay at the hotel. That is, until the Union took control of the city in 1863. With the Southern soldiers out of the way, the building was quickly turned into a hospital. The war was brutal, and many of the wounded died there, including Union General William Sanders. Following the end of the Civil War, the hotel continued to welcome famous visitors, actors, artists, politicians, but it declined over time. It also bounced from owner to owner until it was finally purchased in 1908 by the Auditorium Company. After taking ownership, the company tore down a few of the hotel's wings, but renovated the ballroom to turn it into a theater. And for the next few decades, the Bijou Theater welcomed both live stage acts and films through its doors. Audiences could go see a vaudeville show one night, and then the latest moving picture the next. The hotel portion continued to operate until 1969, when it was shut down by the city, although the theater side kept running. But the years were hard on the Bijou, and it was almost lost for good, until 2005, when it was rescued and restored. Today, it hosts operas, musicals, concerts, and other stage productions. Oh, and quite a few ghosts as well. You see, it's considered the most haunted building in all of Knoxville, with multiple reports from those who have witnessed the ghost figure of a Civil War-era soldier wandering throughout the theater. They often make special mention of the buttons on his uniform. Others have felt hands tugging at their clothing while they visit the restroom. Security guards patrolling the venue at night claim to have heard footsteps on the catwalk when no one else was in the building. And those who found themselves alone there have said that they've heard their names being called out by some unknown voice. But one of the most blatant examples of haunted activity at the Bijou is also the most violent. Upon occasion, handfuls of plaster, dirt, and wood have been thrown down from the rafters, often aimed at the employees below. Are the ghosts trying to send a message, or do they simply dislike the act on stage? We may never know, but on the bright side, at least they aren't throwing tomatoes. Going through those stories from home can often work a lot like a photo album or our high school yearbook. Revisiting them can help us relive emotions that we might have once forgotten. Except in the case of hometown legends, those emotions are almost always fear. But not all the stories we love are rooted in tragedy and pain. One, at least, is a favorite for a different kind of emotion: wonder. My teammate Sam Alberti grew up in Minnesota's Twin Cities, but one state legend made a 150-mile journey to him when he was a boy, and it has stuck with him ever since. In 1898, in the town of Kensington, Minnesota, a block of stone was discovered tangled in the roots of a tree on a plot of land owned by a man named Olaf Oman. Olaf was a Swedish immigrant who'd been removing stumps and trees from his field to prepare it for plowing when he stumbled upon the stone. But this was no ordinary rock. It measured about 30 inches long by 16 inches wide and 6 inches thick, and it weighed about 200 pounds. But what struck Olaf the most about that had been chiseled into it. Why? Because the inscription was eventually translated, and it told the story of 8 Swedes and 22 Norwegians who had traveled from Vinland through the west. They'd set up camp about a day's journey from the stone. Later, after a handful of them left camp to go fishing, they returned to find 10 of their men dead and covered in blood. Those ruins, by the way, were dated 1362. Let that date sink in for a bit. If the inscription was real, that meant that there were Scandinavian explorers who had made their way far, far inland more than 100 years before Columbus arrived in the Americas, and that they'd met their end at the hands of some unknown enemy.
Columbus never made it to the mainland.
Became the talk of the town. Some believed it was the real deal.
He made it to an island, then
age. But there were also
said he made it.
Was little more than a hoax. A number of scholars and experts, including archaeologists, linguists, and historians, reviewed the inscription, and they deemed it to be a fake. But in 1907, a Norwegian-American journalist named Hjalmar Holland acquired the stone. He argued for its authenticity and remained its most ardent defender for decades. Over the years, he developed the theory the Vikings had conducted an extensive inland expedition in North America via Greenland and Hudson Bay. These mooring stones were used to mark their route. Then in 1928, he sold the stone to some businessmen in Alexandria, Minnesota for $2,000. But despite Holland's protests in the affirmative, countless experts who have reviewed the stone have rejected it as a forgery. They've argued that the language of the runic inscription is much closer to modern Swedish than anything that would have been used in the 14th century. On top of that, tests of the stone and the soil it was found buried in determined that it had been buried for only 25 years prior to its discovery. Oman may have found it, but he probably wasn't the one who had buried it. And yet, the dismissals of its authenticity haven't discouraged other runic experts who cite medieval manuscripts that contain many of the same anomalous characters as those found on the stone. So, what's the truth? Well, no one knows for sure. As a result, the Kensington runestone has been a topic of hot debate for the last 125 years. And it probably will be for a long time to come. We all have favorite legends, often rooted in the places we were born and raised. From coastal tales to inland treasures, these stories are a bit of home that we carry with us everywhere we go. Sharing them is simply the proper thing to do, so I hope you enjoyed this journey. But I'm not done quite yet. I've saved one last tale to delight you with, and if you stick around through this brief sponsor break, I'll tell you all about it. This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. Some of the toughest battles we often fight are when we know what's good for us, but our brains keep getting in the way. For example, knowing that you need to go to sleep, but your mind is swamped with racing thoughts. And that often leaves us feeling stuck. I've been there so many times before in my life, so I know exactly how it feels to get stuck in those moments. But it turns out, one great way to make those racing thoughts go away is to talk them through. Therapy helps you figure out what's holding you back, so you can work for yourself instead of against yourself. And if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and is designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you need to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lore today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp.
Or discovered.
HELP.com/lore.
Right
From
here.
the streets to the trails, freedom is electric.
So there is more hordes.
4xE and Grand Cherokee 4xE. Electrify
More
your
up
next
here.
holiday adventure at your local Connecticut dealer.
13!
Best deals of the season during the Black Friday sales event.
Oh god. I have a whole bunch of hordes to kill.
The Massachusetts town of Ipswich is a lovely coastal community that resides in the northeast corner of the state. But Ipswich is known for more than its ocean views and peaceful setting. It's also the hometown of my teammate Robin Miniter, and a man named Harry Mayne. According to the stories, Harry Mayne arrived in Ipswich in 1671 with a companion named Andrew Diamond. They had come from the Isle of Shoals, just off the coast of Maine and New Hampshire. Both were fishermen,
I do this for
and they
I'm right
wasted
here
no time
anyways,
getting
so.
to work. Now, Diamond got rich in the shipping business, along with another business partner named Francis Wainwright. But Harry, well, he went a different route. He ended up taking on several less legitimate jobs, working as a smuggler, a pirate, and something called a mooncusser. Mooncussers were particularly reviled, even by pirates. They would set up decoy lights along the coasts and lure ships toward them at night. The vessels would then wreck along the sandbars and breakers, and then Harry and his men would climb aboard, murder the crew, and steal whatever they could. Harry Mayne and his fellow wreckers were eventually caught and tried for their crimes. Harry received one of the worst punishments of all, too. He was chained to the Ipswich Bar, where he had carried out his awful misdeeds, and sentenced to shovel sand until he either dropped dead or drowned. When the weather got stormy and kicked up the waves, he would yell and scream, causing the people in town to say things like, "Old Harry's growling again," or "The devil is raising old Harry." After his death, in a twist of bitter irony, his home was ransacked and plundered for loot, specifically the valuables that he'd stolen from all the ships he'd wrecked. The trouble was, no one found anything. It seems whatever treasure he may have had was long gone. Meanwhile, a local man started having dreams. Dreams of a specific place in town where someone had buried large amounts of money on a hill. And this man recognized the place instantly. So after his third night of dreaming about it, he decided to check it out for himself. He snuck out around midnight carrying his Bible, a lantern, and a spade, with one thing on his mind, finding that hill. And find it he did. Right away he started digging. It took some time, but his shovel eventually clanged against something hard beneath the dirt. He dug a little more and uncovered a large flat stone with an iron bar next to it. Grateful for an extra tool, the man picked up the bar and began prying the stone from its position when he noticed something strange. He looked up to see an army of black cats surrounding him, their eyes glowing in the darkness. With a swing of the iron bar, he dispersed the cats, but his problems only grew worse. Icy water began to fill the hole where he was standing. Not wanting to drown or get stuck, the man climbed out and let the water consume the stone. But he didn't leave empty-handed. He was still holding that bar, so he took it home and turned it into a latch for one of his doors. The man wasn't nervous, but most of you, with all the folklore we've heard over the years, probably see what's coming. By bringing that artifact into his home, the man also allowed something else inside. The ghost of Harry Maine.
Oh,
And it
God.
haunted that dwelling for years. According to local legend, it took a visit from every minister in town to finally cleanse the house of that evil spirit, which soon found a new place to live on Plum Island as it searched for its missing body. Soon enough, locals refused to go out during storms because they felt the ghost of Harry Maine was
Wait, Lost
still out
Lake has
there,
it.
digging in the sand to find his remains.
I wonder if you could see either. I wonder where Sarah is.
Produced by me,
Here.
Aaron Mankey, with writing by Harry Marks and research
Here.
by the entire Grim and Loud team. Cassandra De
Here
Alba, Jamie
or
Vargas,
here.
Jenna Rose Nethercott, Harry Marks,
Or Hot
Alice Steed,
Springs.
Alex Robinson, Sam Alberti, and Robin Miniter. Of course, lore is much more than just a podcast. There's a book series available in bookstores and online, and 2 seasons of the television show on Amazon Prime Video. Check them both out if you want more lore in your life. Information about all of that and more is available over at lorepodcast.com. Don't like the ads? I've got a solution. There's a paid version of Lore on Apple Podcasts and Patreon that's 100% ad-free. Plus, subscribers get weekly mini episodes called Lore Bites. It's a bargain for all that ad-free storytelling and a great way to
what?
support this show and the team behind it. And you can also follow this show on YouTube, Threads, and Instagram. Just search for Lore Podcast, all one word, and click that follow button. And when you do, say hi. I like it when people say hi. And as always, thanks for listening.
No, give me that one.
At Bona, we know there are all kinds of critics in the world who find fault with everything. Like your nosy neighbor, that fancy friend of yours who's always trying to one-up you, or even your hard-to-please mother-in-law.
I need
But one thing
quiet.
you can be sure of, when you clean your floors with Bona's uniquely formulated plant-based floor cleaners, you can impress the unimpressible with your beautiful clean floors. Find out more at Bona.com. Bona, for floors that impress.
From the streets to the trails, freedom is electric in the new Jeep Wrangler 4xE and Grand Cherokee 4xE. Electrify your next holiday adventure at your local Connecticut dealership for our best deals of the season during the Black Friday sales event.
I was crossing the street when I met the love of my life. I chased after her. Nothing would stand in my way. Not the dog walker, nor the hot dog vendor. Finally reaching her, I asked, "What do you call that amazing smell?"
Gate Flings.
Game Flings. My love had a name, but more importantly, it had a scent.
Fall in love with Game Flings. Seriously good scent.
What
Find it
the
at your local
fuck?
Stop and Shop.
What the fuck did I just hear?
With a new Jeep Wrangler 4
What the fuck did I just
Grand
hear?
Cherokee 4 by E. Whether you choose the most planet-friendly Wrangler ever or the most capable Grand Cherokee ever, you'll discover the freedom of power both on and off the road. No matter how you choose to charge forward,
Finally.
the choice is clear for your next electric SUV. Hurry in to save big with our best deals of the season at your local Connecticut dealership during the Black Friday sales event.
Let's be honest, life is hectic. Between work and family and friends and chores, it can be hard to find time for yourself. We all find ourselves longing for peace and quiet from time to time. A moment alone with a book or a creative project, or even just time to sit and think. And in November of 2021, one woman finally received just that. For 500 days, in a cave, 230 feet below ground. 50-year-old Beatrice Flamini is an extreme athlete from Spain. She was participating in a research expedition called Time Cave in collaboration with the University of Granada. The goal was to study how extended isolation and lack of sunlight might affect a person's experience of time. And to Flamini, the challenge sounded like just her cup of tea. After being lowered into the cave, Flamini spent the next year and a half alone, reading, weaving, exercising, drawing, and preparing meals. And what did she say when the scientists finally came to retrieve her on April 14th of 2023? "I didn't want to come out yet," she said. "Already? No way. I hadn't finished my book." Now, if you're feeling your chest tighten at the very idea of this story, you aren't alone. What was a dream come true to Beatrice Flamini would be, for many of us, a nightmare. Claustrophobia is, of course, one of our oldest and most common human fears, and horror writers have made use of this for centuries. Like Edgar Allan Poe's The Cask of Amontillado. If you've ever read it, then no doubt the final horrifying image is burned permanently into your mind. A man, deep in a catacomb, far from sympathetic ears, being bricked up alive against his will. It's a terrifying story, the kind that makes us shiver while reading it. But thankfully, it was only that, a story. But unfortunately, that isn't exactly the case, because immurement, the act of sealing a living person into a wall or tomb, is far from fictitious.
It's supposed to hurt.
In fact, it's a chilling fate that has befallen
We both hit it early.
throughout history. And it's time we unpack the truth behind the legend, one brick at a time. I'm Aaron Mankey, and this is Lore.
Oh. Oh.
The word immure is derived from the Latin words in and murus, meaning in or into, and wall. Pretty straightforward as far as etymology goes. But the practice itself is far less simple. From a way to punish criminals, to torturous political execution, to superstitious human sacrifice, immurement has been doled out for nearly as many reasons as there were victims. Take the immurement of the Vestal Virgins, for example, which we've covered here before. As you recall, Vestal Virgins were an order of priestesses in ancient Rome who served Vesta, the goddess of the hearth and a protector of Rome. These Vestal Virgins were responsible for keeping the fire of the Temple of Vesta perpetually burning. If it went out, it would be seriously bad news, because it meant that the goddess's protection of Rome would also snuff out. So, suffice to say, Vesta's priestesses couldn't afford distractions, and that's where the virgin part came in. Hard to tend to an eternal flame if you're busy romping around with some handsome gladiators, right? And breaking that vow was more than just a sin. It was essentially treason, since they were putting Rome itself in danger. It was sacrilegious, however, to kill a Vestal Virgin. To punish one who broke her vow of chastity, they had to find more creative methods. And what's a way to execute someone you aren't allowed to physically kill? That's right, immurement. Vestal virgins who broke their chastity vows would sometimes be sealed into tombs alive. That way no one had to execute them. Starvation or suffocation would take care of that, and the state's hands would be clean. The victim would be stripped of her badges of office, dressed like a corpse, and led down into her vault while her sisters wept, looking on. The tomb contained only a couch, a lamp, and a table with a small amount of food, which would obviously run out way too soon. I can only imagine the horror these priestesses must have felt, staring at the final bite of bread, that last handful of dried fruit, as the lamplight began to dim. There were about 10 recorded cases of Vestal Virgin immurement, which, given the order existed for about 1,000 years, is luckily a fairly low frequency. But still, I can't help but feel like that's 10 too many. The Vestal Virgins were the only religious figures in history to be punished that way. In 1409, for example, 4 Christian clerics in Augsburg, Bavaria were accused of pedophilia. First, the men were forced into wooden coffins and locked inside. Then the church suspended the coffins with ropes inside a tall tower where the clerics were left to starve. In another case, in the year 1149, Duke Otto III of Olomouc, part of the Moravian Przemyśl dynasty, claimed that an abbot had molested his wife. So he did the only reasonable thing. He had the abbot and 20 other monks immured in the monastery refectory as punishment, where they all starved to death.
Child molester.
And of course, he seized the monastery's wealth, too. As punishment,
molester.
Does seem a bit suspicious in retrospect. But immurement wasn't just for punishing transgressions. It was also a means of political execution. In India in the year 1660, Shah Shosha, he ended up trying to overthrow the Arachnes king, and let's just say that it didn't go over very well. Shah Shusha was killed, but the king didn't stop in his execution. He also killed all of Shah Shusha's children. The sons were beheaded, but the daughters had it even worse. They were immured in their own apartments and left to die. And then there's Flavius Basilicus, the emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire. I thought he was going to say they got raped. To 476 CE. Once overthrown, he and his family were sealed up in either a cistern or a tower.
Okay, where they died, good. They didn't get raped. Well, maybe they did.
Friend,
I don't know.
Bowtry, the serial killer who turned her lavish home into a torture chamber for young women, she too was immured within her home, where she was supplied with food until she died 4 years later. Consider it an extreme version of house arrest. Sometimes, though, immurement wasn't about crime and punishment at all. In fact, in many instances throughout history, to be immured was quite the opposite. It was considered holy. Take, for instance, the children of Yuyayaco. In 1999, archaeologists discovered 3 perfectly preserved ancient Incan mummies on the border of Chile and Argentina, sealed in a small tomb 1.5 meters underground. All 3 were children, and they appear to have been human sacrifices. Examination of remains revealed that the children were likely selected for sacrifice a year prior, being fed fine foods like maize and animal protein, as well as being heavily drugged before their sacrificial day. Once the children were asleep due to the alcohol and cacao they were fed, they were then sealed alive into a tomb within the Yuyayaco volcano. And there they remained for 500 years.
Because crows.
Whether used for ritual or retribution, closing a person into their own grave, brick by brick, sounds like a fate worse than death. It's honestly hard to imagine a crime worthy of that kind of punishment. But the thing is, sometimes immurement
That's gonna be a bad idea.
To do with the person immured. Often it was less about the victim and more about the vault. There are all sorts of lucky charms out there, right? Rabbit's feet, 4-leaf clovers, human corpses. And if that last one seems out of place, well, it's actually not. It's pretty common. The practice has different names in different cultures. Da Sheng Shuang in China, Hito Bashiwa in Japan, Mio Sade in Burma. But it all refers to the same kind of thing, sealing a person inside a construction project, usually a bridge or a building, to make the structure stronger. Now, if you're like me, you're asking yourself one simple question at this point, right? Why? What exactly does any of this achieve? Well, a number of things, it turns out. Sometimes human pillars, as they were called, were intended as sacrifices to the gods and spirits of the earth who were being disturbed in order to build the structure in question. In other cases, the spirit of the dead would become a phantom guardian, protecting the structure from harm. And oftentimes, it was both. One story from Hampi, India, tells of a wall with a history of falling down. So, a pregnant woman is buried beneath it to make sure that it would stay standing. To this day, the wall is sacred to women pilgrims. And then there's the Balkan Ballad, the Bridge of Arta, which follows a group of masons hard at work on building a bridge. They labor all day, only to watch the bridge collapse each night. One day, a talking bird comes to them, as talking birds do, and proclaims that if you bury not a human being, no bridge can be strong. But not just any human being. The gods demanded the head mason's wife. So the builders tell the wife that her husband has dropped his ring into the foundation pit and asks her to go down and retrieve it. She dutifully descends, and then the masons seal her in. This idea of closing your life into a foundation is so common, in fact, that legendary folklorist Alan Dundes even edited an entire book about it called The Walled Up Life. In Japan, human pillars were common practice from ancient times through the 16th century. Japan's Maui River Castle, Matsue Castle, and Matsue Opashi Bridge are all rumored to have been built with the help of human sacrifice. Legend says when the Matsue Opashi Bridge was being built in 1608, the builders grew more and more despairing because every time they tried to embed a pillar in the river, it was swallowed up by water and sediment. There seemed to be no solid ground to build on, and so they decided to try another approach. That's right, a human pillar. The workers seized a man named Gensuke and buried him alive in the riverbed beneath the bridge's middle pillar. And how did poor Gensuke earn his fate, you might ask? Well, by wearing his trousers wrong. Yes, you heard that right.